those with money and power, they don't want you to know this. Yeah? The record of neoliberal policies actually appalling.
Ha-Joon Chang is a world-renowned economist. His books, including 23 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism and Edible Economics, have sold over 2.5 million copies in 47 countries worldwide.
The biggest problem with the UK economy is that it has not invested for the last 30 years. Yeah? So my question to British policymakers and businessmen is, how do you think you can get away with this? Yeah?
Maybe they can replace the politicians.
Yeah.
There you go.
That might be an idea.
What was your favorite book you've ever written?
Ooh, can't quite decide. It's like asking parents which kid do you love the most. Yeah?
Say it's him.
It should be me.
Yeah.
My parents ask.
Yeah, so I like them for different reasons. Yeah.
I think that's all part of this mission to make economics more understandable to the general public.
Yeah.
I think Edible Economics, the latest book, is like the epitome of that.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm not sure whether I can top this, but no, this has been long in the making. I mean, as I say in the acknowledgement in this book, the global financial crisis erupted in 2007. And then I had to write something more immediate. So that became 23 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism. And then I was trying to write this again. And then Penguin made this offer that I couldn't refuse, which was that they want to revive the Pelican paperback series. And they want my book on economics to be the first one. Mm-hmm. So
this point around making economics accessible, when you did the 23 book, you did a talk and you said in it that in a capitalist society, unless everyone understands something about economics, democracy is meaningless.
Absolutely, yeah.
Can you explain what you mean by that, please?
Yeah, well, the capitalism is a system where everything has to be filtered through the logic of the economy and more narrowly the market. Yeah? So whether it's the teaching of ancient languages in universities, whether it's funding of young artists, the funding of the museums, everything has to justify itself in terms of the money it makes and its economic value. And so when everything from the more obviously economic things like your mortgage interest rate and job availability and so on, down to whether your kids could actually become an artist without having a rich parent, or whether your local library is kept open, everything is related to economic decisions. And in that kind of society, if you don't know at least some economics, what are you voting for? It becomes like voting in, I don't know, the X Factor, I like the look of that guy, she has beautiful voice, but is it how we need to decide which politician, which parties are going to run our lives? So we really need to learn at least some economics. I know it's quite difficult because most people are just struggling to survive. I mean, many people are working 2 jobs, 3 jobs. They are tired. They don't have time. But I think that it's exactly that because of this difficult situation that we need to learn economics, because our lives are like that for a reason. Mm-hmm. Some politicians, some big financiers, they have made decision that we will create a lot of these gig economy jobs. I mean, the jobs used to be quite stable and decently paid in the old days. Since the 1980s, Britain has constantly deregulated the economy, including the labor market. So now you have all these unstable, poorly paid jobs. And your life is difficult exactly because of that. Because there's no God-given reason that you need to have this kind of labor market. And actually in the early days of capitalism, most jobs were like that. Yeah? And it's only because the trade unions fought for it, politicians fought for it, ordinary people demanded it, that you have restrictions on working hours, you have mandatory paid holidays, you have maternity leave, you have certain protection for jobs, grievance procedures. So these things have all been created by human action. So that the reason why we have this crappy labor market, I mean, it's a complex story, but is that because someone made certain decisions somewhere that you didn't fight for, you didn't fight against because you didn't know what was going on.
So do you think nowadays people are less in touch with economics than they were before? Because you mentioned it's a bit like X factor voting, but when I watched the presidential elections in America, the debate was a bit like X factor.
Absolutely,
It was just like
popularity contest.
who's more credible, who's more funny,
Exactly,
who seems less like senile and like not there. So
Exactly,
it's a bit more like, so you want to make economics great again. Why do you think it's less?
That's what you did there.
Make economics great again.
Yeah.
But why do you think it's less mega now? Why do you think less people?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of reasons. I mean, one is the kind of decline of trade union movements. So that in the trade unions, you were forced to, discuss what kind of policy we want to demand from our company, from our the government. And people naturally got drawn into that discussion. I mean, not everyone was equally engaged, but the 40-50% of people belong to trade unions, and you had a lot of natural exposure to that. So our lives have changed because Britain deindustrialized, lost a lot of manufacturing, which is where trade union movements are the strongest for various reasons. And through that, people lost ways to be in touch with the economic issues in a natural way on a day-to-day basis. So now you have to actually pay attention to what's going on. And once again, you don't have time, you don't have the energy. But the other is the spread of this the neoliberal market oriented.
Sorry.
Yeah.
What does neoliberal mean for our listeners?
Neoliberal. Yeah. Okay. So in the beginning there was the
Adam and Eve.
Yeah, how far back we going?
no.
In the beginning, there was
Not
man
that
and
far
woman.
when it comes to the economics. That in the beginning there were the Tories and the Whigs. Yeah. The Tories were the conservatives. The Whigs were the liberals. The conservatives were basically in those days the party of the landlords. Yeah? Liberals were party of the capitalists. Yeah? And these people actually were quite different from what you think when you hear the word liberal today, because they, the liberty they wanted to defend was the liberty of property owners to do whatever they want with the property. So they were against all sorts of regulations. Yeah, I mean, if some people want to hire 6-year-old kids, and those kids come voluntarily to work there, let them do it, kind of. Yeah. And then they also completely against democracy. Yeah. Yeah, I mean they gave voting rights only to people with some property. Yeah? So this is even after the so-called Great Reform Act of 1832, only like 18% of British men could vote. Yeah, never mind the women and so on. Yeah. So those are the liberals. Yeah, no limit on the market, no democracy. Yeah? Neoliberals are updated version of that in the context of the late 20th century, which accepted democracy, but they do everything to weaken democracy. So they want independent central bank, independent regulator for utilities, independent, in some countries, even independent tax authority and so on. Independent from what? From the influences of politicians, which is influence of people. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So that they accept formal democracy, but they eviscerated it. Yeah? And then in terms of market regulation, yes, I mean, they are not as extreme as 19th century liberals. I mean, they wouldn't say, well, we need to
Get the kids in the work.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, bring kids back to factories in order to have a free labor market. Yeah, we need to abolish all the government regulation on environment. So they are not that extreme, but they want to minimize regulations. Yeah? So that's neoliberalism. I mean, the word liberal, liberty, freedom. I mean, these are very deceptive words. Yeah,
they're emotive, aren't they? They kind of make you feel, new liberalism. It sounds a certain kind of way.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds very idealistic.
It sounds like I want that.
Yeah. If you say that I'm anti-liberty, anti-freedom,
like Nazi over there.
Exactly. Yeah, but you have to first of all know that the kind of freedom but they emphasize is freedom of property owners. They accept the other economic freedoms, but many of them are secondary to the freedom of the property owners. Yeah.
I think this is really important for the audience that you say that there are lots of schools of thoughts within economics, and what we've essentially done in maybe the West or America and England, UK especially, is run with one, the neoliberalism.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's like that in many countries. I mean, it's not just the US and Britain, although it kind of started in Britain with Margaret Thatcher and in the US with Ronald Reagan in the late 70s, early 80s. Yeah, so this ideology has become well, I shouldn't call it ideology because in that sense, everything is ideology. This economic idea has become so dominant that a lot of people don't even know that there are other ways of thinking about the
They just think it's economics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that I mean that is very dangerous and unhealthy. I mean, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have your opinion. Yeah? I mean, saying that there are many different ways of looking at the world, saying that we need the plurality of thinking about the economics and the rest of the world doesn't mean that you shouldn't have an opinion. I mean, it can't be anything goes. But my point is that different approaches to economics, or what is sometimes called different schools of economics, they all have their weakness and strength. Yeah. Because they were designed to explain certain things, but not others. Yeah, they were based on certain assumptions about human nature and the nature of society. Yeah? So neoclassical economics, which is at the core of neoliberalism, because there are some neoclassical economists like Joseph Stiglitz and Paul Krugman who are not neoliberals. Yeah, so these two things needs to be distinguished. That neoclassical economics is an approach in economics, but these days there's a kind of the dominance by this sub-variety of neoclassical economics called neoliberalism. Yeah? So this idea has become so dominant that now a lot of people think that is economics. But then we had many interesting economic thinkers, Adam Smith, Karl Marx, John Maynard Keynes, Joseph Schumpeter, and all these people who had a very different way of understanding the world. So they built a very different economic theories. So the neoclassical economics was created to explain market exchange in a mature capitalist economy. It came about in the late 19th, early 20th century. So that's what they wanted to do. So it's very good at understanding the market. But when it comes to other aspects like production, equality, international trade, it's actually not that good. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to managing the government budget, interest rate, the so-called macroeconomic policy, the kind of things that the Chancellor of the Exchequer that in this country should pay attention to, neoclassical theories are not as good as Keynesian theory, because Keynes had this much more sophisticated understanding of the nature of the financial market and the nature of money and so on. So yeah, depending on the different issues that famous British expression, horses for courses. Yeah? Depending on the issue you want to analyze, you need to use different frameworks. And even if you are using one framework to analyze one thing, I mean, knowing other approaches, knowing other frameworks actually help you think about things in a more kind of balanced, sophisticated way. Huh? So we need to learn different kind of economics. I mean, now this is making things even more difficult, yeah, because learning one kind of economics, is challenging given how you are exhausted by life. Yeah, now I'm telling people you have to learn more than one. Yeah.
One of the goals of personal finance is to take the money that we earn and to put it to work, so that one day we can hopefully stop working. But I often speak to company owners who have got plenty of money, quite large sums of cash, just sat in their business bank account doing absolutely nothing. So why not at least put that money to work? This is why I'm happy that we're working with Tide. They offer an instant access saver which I use as an account to generate interest on excess money for things like tax savings. New members can get up to 4.48% AER variable for 6 months. I say up to because it depends on how much you deposit in your account. The more you save, the higher the rate. You can get this deal, plus you can get £100 cash back if you fund your Tide Instant Saver account with £5,000 in the first 30 days, if you use code MAKINGMONEY. T's and C's apply. The code is MAKINGMONEY, all one word, or you can use the link in the description where you'll also find all of the offer and the full terms. The variable rate is correct as of April 15th, 2025. Why has neoclassical neoliberalism persisted and won then in that debate, and off that, has it achieved what it set out to do?
Yes. Well, I think the record of neoliberal policies actually appalling. I mean, you don't hear about this very often because the supporters of those policies that basically those with money and power, they don't want you to know this. Yeah. So, for example, probably most people know that in most countries, in the last, say, 40 years of neoliberalism, income inequality has risen, sometimes dramatically. Huh? I mean, Britain is one of those countries. Yeah? I mean, it hasn't risen so much in the recent period, but in the early days of Thatcherism and so on, Britain was actually at that time one of the most equal countries in the world. Yeah? And now it's one of the least equal countries in the rich country group. Yeah? I mean, of course, there are countries like Brazil, South Africa, where inequality is just off the chart.
And like the G7 or the OECD.
Yeah, so OECD is the rich country group that I had in mind. And in that group, the US is by far the most unequal country, but Britain belongs to this second tier group. That probably a lot of people know, but what people don't know is that, the neoliberals came in saying that, okay, so much for inequality, we need to grow our pie. Yeah? So this is the famous trickle-down theory. Yeah? Economists are sagging, we want more growth. And the way to get more growth is to give more money to people who are at the top, who are the investors. And that will result in greater wealth creation. And that wealth will trickle down to make everyone richer. So you might have a smaller slice of pie as a proportion of the size of the pie. But in absolute terms, your pie slice will be bigger than what you used to have. No?
It's a stretch, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, logically, not wrong, but,
we need to make them richer so that their money trickles down to you.
Exactly, So some people truly believed in that, and lo and behold, the result is the opposite. Now the world economies are growing much more slowly, despite super growth of China, yeah? Because almost all the other countries are growing much more slowly. So during the so-called golden age of capitalism between, say, 1950 and 1975, the world economy was growing at nearly 3% per year in per capita terms. Yeah? In the last 40 years, this growth rate has fallen basically to half that, yeah? 1.4, 1.5. Yeah? So actually, we have given more money to people at the top in the expectation, or we were told that we should have that expectation, that they'll accelerate economic growth. Yeah? The result has been the opposite. Yeah? So why have we given more money to these people if they haven't done their job? Yeah? So that's the biggest secret of neoliberalism. I mean, of course, I'm simplifying. I don't believe that my story is 100% correct. There are other intervening factors, and so. But I mean, they have not confronted this kind of glaring gap in their argument. Yeah? Trickle down has not happened. Yeah, because the economy is now growing more slowly. Yeah?
Why don't they? Is it because of political influence and power to protect that wealth that they've amassed?
Yeah, so
Is it that cynical?
Yeah, no, it's not cynical. I mean, the thing about neoliberalism is that it's blatantly in favor of the rich people.
Yeah.
Even neoclassical economics, it doesn't have to be, but it has a bias towards the status quo, because neoclassical economics starts its analysis after accepting the given distribution of money, power, and wealth. Yeah? And then they try to see whether we can improve the situation without hurting anyone, without upsetting the status quo. And even within that approach, you can do a lot of regulations, a lot of reforms, and so on. So that this creates people like Stiglitz and Krugman, who are neoclassical economists, but they are very reformist. Yeah? But if you kind of do not take that route of neoclassical economics and just say that the free market is the best, then you get the neoliberals. Yeah? So the neoliberals are in power because they basically say, well, everything is fine, you are doing great, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, these are our the heroes. Yeah?
So they don't want to change anything.
Exactly, yeah.
So who are the neoliberals in the UK? Who could you point to?
Well, they are all over the place. Yeah, I mean, in the Labour Party, in the Conservative Party, in the academia, because it has become the defining ideology of our time. Yeah, sometimes likened what Mrs. Thatcher did, and then how Labour, at least New Labour, reacted to it with deregulating traffic. Yeah? So Mrs. Thatcher came along and said, "Oh, that we have all these restrictions on how fast you can drive and what you can and cannot do on the road, and all these regulations on the protective seat belts. So let's get rid of traffic lights. Let's get rid of the mandatory seat belt. Let's get rid of the speed limits and so on." So yes, probably some people went around faster and made more money, but it created a lot of the car crash victims. Yeah, and then comes along New Labour and says, yes, isn't it terrible that these people are all hurt in this process? So let's set up some fund to give victim support. Let's try to give priority to the road accident victims in hospital emergency rooms and so on. But they are not doing anything about the abolition of traffic rules. Yeah. So in that sense, they, even Labour, well, not all of them, but the majority of them have bought into this neoliberal ideology. Yeah? So this is why we need to change the politics to change this kind of thinking. Yeah? And this is why people need to learn economics, because they need to realize that you need to change politics at the more fundamental level, in the sense of changing economic policies rather than just changing kind of the politicians because they have a slightly different view on immigration and workery and so on. Yeah? Because unless that fundamental economic changes, I mean, it wouldn't matter too much which party you vote in terms of your everyday life. Yeah? And neoclassical economists, some of them are trying to change things, but their theoretical framework is that we do not upset the status quo. Yeah, we do not do radical income distribution like the land reform or nationalization of companies. Yeah, and then there's the only relatively little that you can do, and even those are not being done as a rule because the masters of the universe, yeah, backed up by the politicians like Trump, don't want to change anything. Yeah?
Could you not point to America as a success in terms of growth? There's been a lot of growth in American markets, especially since the 80s.
Yes, the growth, but you have to, in looking at the U.S. Economy, you have to first of all realize that compared to Europeans, Americans work a lot longer. Yeah, so they work at 25%, 30% longer than the French and the
less holidays, don't they?
Significantly less holidays. No, actually, in the US, you don't even have mandatory paid holidays. Yeah, it's at the discretion of the employers. Yeah.
Wow.
So most people just get 2 weeks, but even that is not as of right. Yeah.
So they just work more days, not longer.
So you're saying there's more productivity there? They're just simply hammering.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you have to discount that first. Yeah. So I don't know the latest statistics, but about a decade ago, this Icelandic economist calculated American income not per capita but per hour's work. Yeah. Okay. And it was only like the seventh highest in the world. Yeah. I mean,
where's the highest? Do you remember?
I can't remember, but the
Scandinavia or somewhere.
Yeah, probably.
More importantly, the UK.
Yeah, France was higher than the US.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
What about the UK?
Lower.
It's always low. I know.
Always low. I'm just trying to get us a little cheap win, like a little quick win. But no.
If you calculate it this way or this way,
with this data,
there are great things about this country, but the level of income is not one of them. Yeah? Anyway, so there's that, and secondly, a lot of this growth comes from kind of I don't want to really use this expression, but the unproductive spending on health. Yeah. Because of the way their health system is privatized, and there's the huge insurance industry, lawsuit industry, pharmaceutical companies ripping off customers and so on. Americans spend 17% of their GDP for healthcare. Yeah? In other rich countries, it's around 10, 11%. Yeah? Britain's 10, Ireland, I think, is even lower, like 8. Switzerland, Germany, 11. Yeah, so the Americans are spending at least 1.5 times, up to 2 times more in proportional terms on healthcare than other comparable countries, and they have the worst health record in the OECD. Yeah? So this is a very, very problematic sector. Yeah. And that sector in the recent period has been one of the fastest growing sectors in the economy. Yeah? So is this growth healthy? Questionable. Yeah? And thirdly, and most importantly for ordinary people like you and me, the result of American growth is very unevenly distributed. Oh, yeah? They have by far the highest inequality in the OECD. So if you count all those things, the longer working hours, the growth of this very problematic the healthcare sector, uneven distribution of the outcome, then are you really sure whether the average American has a good life?
Yeah, the average is not not like, you know, for you plonk a normal person there, your chances of high success are not as maybe as
Exactly,
rosy
yeah.
as it
So
seems.
this is why Bernie Sanders, the left-wing American politician, once famously said that if you want the American dream, go to Scandinavia.
Yes.
No, American dream was real.
Yeah.
In the 19th century, 20th century, the country was the expanding territory-wise. The huge influx of immigrants. Of course, I mean, in the process, the Native Americans were, persecuted, massacred, and the African Americans were used as the slaves and so on. So very dark history. But at least that if you belong to the white group, you had truly the chances for being son of the Hungarian peasant and becoming one of the richest person in the country.
Lots of upward mobility
Exactly,
at
yeah.
that point.
That is gone. Yeah.
I would like to talk a bit about the UK. I want to start with a question for you, if that's okay. Why did you choose to live in the UK, considering that you could live anywhere and you do your work?
And you hate our food.
Yeah, you said the food was traumatic.
Yeah. No, I
It wasn't
like
for the food.
You obviously ate my nan's cooking because it
Yeah,
was pretty bad.
I like the British detective stories. I like British music. I was a huge fan of the bands like Pink Floyd, Deep Purple, Yes, the Led Zeppelin. That I love British sense of humor. So culturally, this is my home. Yeah, but yes, cooking. Well,
You said it's better now, though.
It's much better.
much better. Partly because my theory is that, well, I came to the Britain first in the mid 1980s when food was still awful. Yeah, although it was beginning to change. Yeah, my theory is that somewhere in the mid to late 1990s, British people realized that their food sucks. Yeah? No, but this was a great
I know you
thing.
actually said it was like a turning point. Like one day we decided our food sucks, bringing
Exactly,
everyone else's food into our country.
This made you very open-minded in terms of food. Yeah? So once you kind of admit that your own food is not that good, why should you prefer, I don't know, Mexican over Korean or the Indian over the Persian, anything tasty is fine. Yeah? So this country has become a great place to eat. And partly because of that competition, British food itself has shaped up. Yeah, I mean now the British food itself is much
British
better.
classics are good. Yeah, you could get a good shepherd's pie. It's not like
No. More than that. Yeah. So now the British food itself has become much better. Yeah? So I don't have any complaints about food anymore. So why should I live here?
just the economics.
Yeah.
So can we extend that kind of metaphor, if you will, that there was a point where the UK realised that the food was bad and it looked out to the world and brought in influence food-wise. The UK economy feels bad now. How should the UK look out to the world and draw inspiration from other countries?
Yeah, actually, this is a country that has become a victim of this neoliberal idea, because people have stuck to it doggedly, despite it essentially not working. Yeah? And it really needs fresh thinking. I mean, even Rachel Reeves, the Labour Chancellor, using this the metaphor of the country's credit card maxing out, I think it's really a sign how deeply ingrained this neoliberal ideology has become in this country. Because already 100 years ago, John Maynard Keynes was writing all kinds of the academic pieces, but also the newspaper articles and the policy pamphlets, arguing that you cannot run a national economy in the way you run a household. Yeah? Because in a household, yes, you have the hard budget constraint. Yeah? I mean, if you keep spending more than you earn, then you go bankrupt. And that there's no way out. Yeah. However, national economy is a lot more complicated. I'm not saying that you can indefinitely spend more than you earn, but it becomes quite complicated because my spending is your income. Yeah. So if I lose my job as a worker in a factory, I begin to buy fewer things, because I'm on the dole and I can't afford to buy things that I used to. So instead of, 2 loaves of bread that I used to buy per week, now I buy only one. Yeah? And you, baker, finds that your income is reduced. And if there are many of your customers who has lost the job because the local factory shut down, then you have to reduce your own spending. Yeah? So you begin to buy less from the wheat, the flour mills. You buy fewer eggs. You buy the less milk. And then it affects the farmers and the flour milling factory. And then everyone's income is in a downward spiral. And Keynes said that at that point, actually that can make sense if the government borrows beyond this means to generate demand, which will then lift the economy out of the hole, after which it can repay the debt. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, the way to manage the national economy is a lot more complicated than managing a household, but the people keep using this metaphor because that's what the neoliberals want. They want the government to be very passive in terms of its spending. Yeah? We have this country which has become a victim of this economic theory that it has invented. And yes, indeed, look to the rest of the world in the same way that you have look to the rest of the world in terms of food. Yeah? But you have to know what exactly other countries have been doing. You cannot filter the experience with your own ideology. Yeah? Best example, when the Brexit debate was going, a lot of Brexiteers said that we want to make Britain Singapore on the Thames. Yeah? Do they really know what they were talking about? Because if you want to do that, you have to nationalize 90% of your land, provide 85% of housing through government-owned housing corporation, and more than 20% of your GDP should be produced by state-owned enterprises. Yeah? This is Singapore. Yeah?
One of the worst things that I see in my world is scammers who pretend to be me or the podcast and then try and get money out of people who follow us. And sadly, these scammers are getting better and better by the day, which is one of the reasons that we're really happy that we're partnering up with Vanta, who help businesses be secure and then prove that they're secure. Vanta automates compliance for stuff like GDPR, ISO 27001, SOC 2 and more, helping businesses build customer trust. The beauty of Vanta is they save companies a lot of time and money because proving you're secure without them really is an enormous faff. It can take months of work and form filling. Over 9,000 companies like Atlassian, Flow Health and Cora use Vanta to manage their risk and prove their security in real time. If you need to prove that your business is secure and compliant, you can get $1,000 off by going to vanta.com/makingmoney. I've left a link in the description for you.
We're pretty far from that.
Well, how do they get away with it then? Like making these kind of, well, let's be like that and not grounded in fact at all. Who are the economists that are advising them? And you must sit watching your TV just thinking, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, so, by all means, imitate Singapore, but, you have to really know what you are imitating. Yeah, you can't just say that, they have free trade, they welcome foreign investors, which they do. I'm not saying that all of it is untrue, but they don't realize that in doing that, they have used tools that do not fit with this free market story. Huh? I mean, it's a bit too complicated to explain exactly how it was done, but just to give you one example, because Singapore government owns 90% of the land, when it quotes foreign investors, it can offer low rent ground for factories. Yeah? which other governments cannot do. Yeah? So they have this high public land ownership for a number of complicated economic and political reasons, but they have used this actually to
That's not a card we can play here.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't have that ability.
That's right. Yeah. So if you don't have that, then how should you become like Singapore if you want to become like Singapore? Yeah. I mean, there are the countries like Korea, Taiwan, China, which has been very good at industrial policy. Government intervening with the subsidies and regulations and trade protection and many other measures. It's not all about protection and subsidies to create new industries. Yeah? I mean, for example, when Hyundai, the South Korean car company, which is now the third largest car company in the world by the volume, when it first started production of its own design car, this small hatchback called Pony, as you can guess from the name, in 1976, it produced 10,000 cars a year. In the same year, Ford produced 1.9 million cars. General Motors produced 4.8 million cars. So if I took a time machine, went back to 1976 and told people, look, there's this new car company in South Korea which currently produces 0.2% of what Ford General Motors produces, 0.5% of what Ford produces, but give it that just over 30 years, it will become bigger than Ford. In less than 40 years, it will become bigger than General Motors. Would people have accepted my investment proposition? No, they would probably have.
I didn't even know Hyundai was that big now.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. They would have probably put me in a mental institution. Yeah. So but how was that possible? Only because later is a different story. But for the first 12 years, the Korean government banned the import of all cars from abroad. Yeah. For another 10 years, it banned import from the cars from Japan. Yeah, it gave huge loans through state-owned banks highly subsidized. Yeah, of course this company also invested hugely in building R&D capabilities, design capabilities. So I'm not saying that it was just done by the government, but this the cooperation between government and the private sector created these companies. Yeah. So why can't Britain, if it wishes to, promote artificial intelligence industry or the nanomaterial industries, why can't it do something like that? I mean, there are reasons why it may not be able to do it, but that's another story. Yeah? So look at all these other countries and try to learn lessons.
But if you said to the UK population, you can't drive a Mercedes anymore because we want to promote Rovers or Aston Martin. I don't know. They're not even produced in the UK anymore, are they? But there's a lack of freedom there that comes from what you've described.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No. I mean, it's not a very nice thing, but you have to make people realize that. I mean, probably things like cars. I mean,
not today cars, but it could be something.
But it's interesting that you say
exactly,
the success is born out of state intervention, essentially, on quite a big level, land ownership or
exactly. I mean, I've written books like Kicking the Ladder, which is a kind of semi-academic book, and Bad Samaritans, which show that even Britain in the 18th century, US in the 19th century, Germany in the late 19th century, they were all protectionists. They intervened a lot in the economy to develop their economies. Of course, now that they are rich, they don't want other countries to use the same method to follow. So they tell the developing countries, do free trade, do not regulate and so on. So, I mean, there's that historical hypocrisy. But, I think I would elevate it to a higher level because, it's not entirely about the state. It's about the society's ability to make an arrangement to sacrifice the present for a better future.
Future.
So not one, but the biggest problem with the UK economy, which very few people have spotted, is that it has not invested for the last 30 years. So if you look at the last 30 years of the UK economic statistics, it has invested only 16, 17% of the GDP.
In the UK.
Yeah. So the rest is consumed. Yeah. Only 16, 70%. The OECD average is like 21%. Americans and Germans invest 22%. The French and the Swiss invest 23%. The French and the Swiss. The Swiss invest 26% of GDP.
Yeah.
You know, not to speak of Korea investing 29%, China investing 39%. Yeah. So my question to British policymakers and businessmen is, how do you think you can get away with this? Yeah? You are investing in proportional terms only 2/3 of other comparable countries. Yeah? And you think that you can beat the others in the high-tech sectors. And yeah? So this country needs to create a mechanism to invest more. Yeah?
But we have so many good economists in like Oxford and Cambridge. So why are these people not talking to the government and saying, look at what South Korea did, look at what this country is doing, why
Or
don't
just
we
invest?
Or
Why
just
are you
invest,
not
yeah.
investing?
Yeah,
You know?
well, unfortunately, many economists are not really interested in the real world.
So like theories more.
Yeah. But even those who are interested in the real world, they these days tend to be all kind of ideologically biased towards this free market, neoliberal ideas. So they want they do not recommend these policies that involve heavy hand of government. And then, when people try to talk about Korea or Taiwan, I mean, they say, oh, yeah, but those countries are different. Yeah, they have different culture, different politics. You can't do those things in the UK. Yeah, but I mean, there are ways to do these things in a democratic way, not against the grain of British culture. So, for example, the one great strength of this country is that it has so many creative people, creative arts, but also, all these scientists and engineers which are at the top of the world's the top of their game on a world scale. Yeah, but these people may have great ideas, but there are no investors who want to sink money in these potential projects for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years until they produce results. So all these ideas that are either not used or they are snapped up by American, Chinese, Korean companies. So can you think of a way to use those ideas through some kind of policy that encourages investment in those companies by the British investors? I'm not saying that you have to copy Korea or Germany, but there has to be a way. I mean, it's only because that you don't want to do it that you are not thinking about ways to do it.
Yeah. And then, more broadly, I think of, you talk about investment. And I go on about it all the time, but the state of the internet in this country, like for me, living up north, my internet is shocking. I have to drive to my local Tesco's car park to upload videos.
Oh, no.
Because I get a 5G signal there. And this house here that we're in is in London, and the internet's is slow here. And what does that do to productivity at a mass scale?
Yeah, that's the result of this underinvestment. I mean, the rail breaks down all the time. Internet sucks. I mean,
the
movement of people and information and ideas is just we've got the brakes on in this country all the time, haven't we?
Yeah, and from the infrastructure to the actually production facilities. and the amenities for the general public. In absolute terms, things are probably better than when I first came to this country, but in relative terms, we have fallen far behind other countries. It's all because of not all, but it's mainly because you haven't invested. It's not complicated.
That's the point. It's not complicated. So why? The government are elected to do these things and make changes and invest in the UK, ideally. So why is it so difficult? Because it's not working currently.
No, but the trouble is that one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the main reasons why you are investing so little is that you have this financial sector that is overly strong and very short-term oriented. I'm not against finance. I truly believe that without modern finance, the stock market, the government bond market, and investment banking and so on, we will still live in the world of kind of small workshops with 150 workers, because that's how it was, because you couldn't borrow for major investment. You borrowed from your friends and you formed a partnership, and that you couldn't mobilize large-scale money because that investment is by definition risky, and without the limited liability, which made modern corporations possible, you could not ask people to give up their life saving only for them to find that the company has gone bankrupt and the creditors are taking your pots and pans. So I'm a believer in the modern finance, but the trouble is that this sector has become too powerful and too short-term oriented. Just one example, the average period of shareholding in the 1960s in Britain used to be 5 years. So you buy a stock in whatever company, at the time, I guess Austin or, Aston Martin or whatever, you keep it on average 5 years. This had fallen to 8 months on the eve of the financial crisis. Now it's gone up a bit, but so how do you make an investment when shareholders want the result in in less than a year? So this makes companies very short-term oriented, because they have to deliver this return to the shareholders, and the best way to do it is first of all to stop investing, and then sack everyone you can think of,
and distribute profits through dividends.
Exactly,
just to cut to the bone and go, there's the cash.
In the US and in the UK, it's actually a bit higher in the US, but in the US and the UK in the last 25 years, something like 90% of the profit went to the shareholders in the form of dividends and share buybacks.
You said General Motors would have survived if they hadn't distributed all of the cash as dividends.
General Motors, General Electric, all of this.
General Electric, sorry,
they all
the
the
monumental debt piles they have could have been paid off through not doing buybacks, but they do aggressive buybacks to satisfy shareholder demand.
So if you have only like 5 to 10% of your profit to play with in terms of investment, what are you going to do? I don't have the numbers for the UK, but in the US, until the 70s, corporations redistributed the profit only to the tune of 45 to 55%. And that was considered high by international standard. Today it's like 95. In Britain it's 90. So you make all this profit and you use 5%, 10% of it to invest, to do R&D. No wonder that there's no investment. So, unfortunately, you are in this situation, and somehow a way has to be found to change this. I mean, unless you do a kind of new deal with the financial sector to, at least lower the pressure on the companies to seek short-term profit and distribute the most of the whatever profit that you make to the shareholders, and actually keep some of the profits and invest. It's not going to happen. I mean, this would require some degree of regulation. For example, restricting the scale of share buybacks. I mean, at least put some restrictions on how much of your profit you can buy to share buybacks, because I think that it is illegal in this country, but in the U.S. actually a lot of companies have done share buybacks more than their profit. They borrow money to do share buybacks.
Because the incentives for the board are to push the share price up, because that's how they
absolutely,
measure success.
Yeah,
so
exactly,
you argue as one of your 23 things that like companies shouldn't exist for the benefit of the owners or the shareholders because of this incentive to just drive the stock price up short term. Because if you're a CEO,
now you cannot really call them owners. The ownership is important in that the owner has a long-term stake in the property. So I mean, the most obvious example is that tenants would take care of the property a bit less better than the owner, because the tenant could move out next year, 2 years later, whereas the owner is stuck with the property. So that's the one main justification of the ownership. The owner pays more attention to the upkeep of the thing. But now these the shareholders, they have the ownership for 6 months, 1 year. I mean, why should they care? We have examples. I mean, look at Boeing. Once a totally unchallenged, the supreme company in the aircraft industry until the Airbus came along, and even then, until the late 90s, I mean, Airbus was no competition. Now the companies are falling apart. Why? Because it has done so much the share buybacks. I mean, we have seen that Apple's beginning to lose its edge because what's his name? Steve Jobs refused to do the share buybacks. Now that his successor Tim Cook has done huge amount of share buybacks, and with that sagging investment, it's beginning to lose edge.
You have like a lot of banks do them. Google do big share buybacks, and even like you say, these services that once felt untouchable, they start to lose their shine, don't they?
That's right. Yeah. So I don't know which. I mean, I'm not a financial economist, so I haven't really done empirical work on this. But I think there are these two separate things going on. So there must be some sectors where competition is really fierce, and it's very difficult to stay in the same place for long. That's a positive influence, but there could be the negative side of the story, which is that as soon as companies become fat, I mean, the short-term shareholders descend and suck money out.
It's almost the same as what you were saying about the UK. Like we became fat, we stopped investing, and now we're on a decline.
Unfortunately,
is it as simple as just turning on investment and going, let's go from 18% to 26% and all our problems are fixed?
No, it can't be that, because I mean the quantity matters, but the quality also matters. So if you invest for the sake of investing, then you might be investing in a lot of stupid projects.
There's a lot of obvious places they could. I mean, the benefit of not investing for years is it becomes pretty apparent where you can put some good money, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Like the infrastructure is.
Yeah. Infrastructure is the as the Americans say, no-brainer. But when it comes to, I don't know, the really cutting edge, the sectors like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, nanomaterials, you need the kind of process of exploration and deliberation and conversation between the government, the financial sector, and the potential entrepreneurs and sort of the scientists and engineers who know the field, to really decide, where to invest. I mean, having said that, don't think that investment will always pay off. By definition, if it is always paying off, then you are actually not pushing the boundary.
Yeah.
So you have to accept that there will be some failures. The
And
challenge
make that
is
okay.
to kind of manage the batting average, like in cricket.
Yeah. So what I want to talk about a bit is funding this investment. So you have views on taxation. I think one of the things that you say is, it's not how much, it's how well it achieves its goals.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whenever people talk about tax cuts and so on, I give them the example of Paraguay. If low tax itself was a good thing, every rich person, every corporation should move to Paraguay because they have the top income tax rate of 10% and flat the corporation tax rate of 10%. But very few people are moving there because you'd rather invest in a company in Germany, and pay 30% corporation income tax than setting up the factory in Paraguay because the Paraguay has poorly educated workforce, poor infrastructure, legal system that is not working very well. So a lot of companies would rather pay 30% and do business in Germany.
Yeah.
Or that you rather pay 50% income tax in Denmark and live there rather than moving to Paraguay because Paraguay social services suck. It's much more kind of dangerous than Denmark. And so a lot of people would just stay there. So this example shows what is important is how you spend your tax, rather than how much you tax.
How do you see the UK's handling of tax, and do you think we get value for money here?
I think it depends on who you compare it with. If you compare with developing countries, even South Korea, I think that you are spending tax relatively well, but compare yourself to countries like Finland and Denmark and so on. You are not. But I think that what I want to raise at this point is that you have to see tax in a bigger context. You may say that we are spending too much on NHS, but maybe it's because that you cut the social services too much. So that if you are saying that we need to raise X more pounds for better healthcare, don't just look at healthcare, but look at the whole thing. Look at the social services and the other aspects of your government spending. And then maybe you don't have to raise that much money because the social services might be a lot cheaper. Yeah?
Because taxation, the burden is one of the highest I think it's ever been in the UK. And I know obviously like there's other comparable countries where we say their burden is much higher, but it does feel like we don't get value for money. In this country.
No, I think that has become, the very high for a couple of reasons that are not kind of, if you like, directly related to what the government is doing. Well, in the sense that, one big chunk of the debt was run in order to save the banks and the financial system in the aftermath of 2007-8 financial crisis. Yeah. So yeah, you could say there is indirectly governments that are doing because it deregulated the financial sector, had deregulated the financial sector too much. But directly, it's not like government decided to just splash out the money to the bankers. Yeah. So that's one the burden, and the other is COVID. Yeah?
COVID.
I mean, you had to run a lot of debt in order to keep people alive. Yeah? So I think those the kind of one-off things need to be taken into account in thinking about the public debt and tax burden and so on. But yeah, I mean that doesn't mean that you can just ignore them because like it or not, these things have happened, and you have to live with the consequences. Yeah. But when it comes to things like the financial crisis, you should at least learn lessons from the last round, and try to kind of do things that will prevent the rerun of that kind of crisis in the future. Because my worry is that now that Trump has come into office, he will well, already the U.S. government had much more than the UK government that got rid of the extra regulations that were put in place after the global financial crisis. But now it's going to basically, well, at least try to get rid of all of them. Yeah.
Is it almost like a Big Bang moment with
Exactly.
Thatcher?
And when that happens, the UK banks and financial institutions will come to the UK government saying,
we
got
can't
to
compete.
Deregulate because we can't compete. Yeah. But
so instead of regulating to make the change, we're going to deregulate to follow America to stay
well,
competitive.
the bankers will want that.
Yeah.
But you have to resist it, yeah, because otherwise you
we're
might
gonna
have another
repeat.
financial crisis and then another jump in the public debt. Yeah.
Or is that the moment you say, okay, well, you need to provide support to ideas in Cambridge, and we will do you know what I mean? Is that the deal? Do you say?
Yeah, that
is that
will
the kind
be
of deal that they could strike?
part of the package. But when a country has level of income of Britain, I think growth is less important. Yeah, when you're poor, like say South Korea was in the 60s and 70s in my childhood, economic growth is literally a matter of life and death. Yeah, because if your economic grows faster, more people eat one more bowl of rice. Yeah. They can afford to go to, well, maybe not the doctors, because in those days the health was private, not anymore. But at least they could go to the pharmacy and get some medicine. Yeah, it means that they don't have to see their child die before they reach the age of 5. Yeah, so in those days, growth is absolutely important. But when you are at this level of income, you have to think about people's quality of life, yeah, and you also have to think about distributing the income more fairly. Huh? I mean, I keep telling you, Britain used to be one of the most equal countries in the world. Yeah? I'm not saying that you should go back to that, but at least try not to be the second the most unequal country in the OECD. Yeah? So that growth is one thing, but you also need to think about sharing. Also need to think about there are a lot of things that you can do without spending too much money to improve the quality of people's lives. Yeah, libraries. Yeah. Because all these libraries shutting down, now people have to go to these local cafes and pay
community centers for kids.
Exactly,
they all have to hang out in McDonald's and they eat crap. Whereas before they would go to like a community center and hang out with each other.
Yeah, so these things will have actually more than earned their kind of existence. Yeah, because then you have the happier people, you have healthier people, you have fewer
more productive people.
That's right. Fewer crimes, more productive people. Yeah. So that you need to, at this stage of development, you need to think in a more kind of multi-dimensional way, rather than just saying, well, we need
Free
to
market.
somehow connect these Cambridge professors with financiers to generate more growth. I mean, that's very important. I'm not anti-growth person, but you need to do something bigger, something more sophisticated. So yeah, you have to kind of chart your own way, but I think it's clear that somehow that you have lost the consensus on what is a decent society, and now I mean people are all over the place.
Can we talk about that briefly? So I see two kind of political messages emerging. One is, say, anti-immigration. The other is tax the rich. I would like to know how you think that the public should think about those two things from an economist perspective.
Yeah, well, I mean, as an immigrant, I can't be
You're pretty pro-immigration.
Yeah, but I totally understand that it cannot be infinite. Yeah, so you need to kind of set the number at a reasonable level, and then also provide support for integration. Yeah.
The other tool then, the tax the rich that you alluded to, can we talk about that? Is that something that would work? Is it feasible? Is that an answer to, say, raising tax revenue to fund investment?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest problem is not taxing rich people who normally reside in Britain, normally work here and then pay their taxes. Yeah, so putting another 2% points or whatever on the income tax. I mean,
we should probably define rich.
Yeah,
maybe not
workers.
That too.
Yeah,
not
exactly,
workers, like billionaires or people with like large assets, the Grosvenor estate. Like this.
So the problem is that much higher than that, in the sense that one is these corporations who use these tax haven arrangements and not paying taxes. Yeah, I mean, you keep seeing this news. Google paid only 435 million pounds to the HMRC when it has made 3 billion pound profit. Yeah. Because
Starbucks
exactly,
back in the day,
Starbucks has this subsidiary in the Netherlands, which is has a tax haven arrangement, and then this company charges the shops in Britain for the intellectual property in shop design, and suck profit out of Britain, and then pay little or no tax in the Netherlands. Yeah. So this the corporate tax evasion through tax havens has to be acted upon. I mean, unfortunately, it's not something that Britain can do alone, but at least if the 10 most important economies get together and say, we are not going to protect any transactions conducted with these companies registered in this designated tax havens in our court system, then these tax havens will disappear overnight. Yeah.
But will the Americans, we talk about the protection of like profits. The Americans are going to go, hold on, these are our companies and they're making loads of money. And is Trump going to come in and go, I'll sanction your ass if you try and tax them more?
Yeah, no, exactly. So what the point I'm trying to make is that these tax havens exist only because that people with power and money want them to exist. Yeah. They are not like, the Himalaya mountains, or the Pacific Ocean. I mean, they are not natural phenomena. Yeah? Unfortunately, now these tax havens are protected, if not actively promoted, by the rich and the powerful. Yeah? So that has to be confronted. The other is that a lot of rich individuals will use these tax havens to siphon their money out and not pay the taxes. Yeah, issue of property tax. Yeah, this country has quite high income tax, but unlike many other countries, property tax is very, very low. Yeah.
Yeah.
well, obviously the problem there is that a lot of rich people in these countries, in this country, are landlords, yeah, including your beloved king, yeah. So how are you going to
A little bit less beloved nowadays, I think. I would say.
How are you going to tax the properties? Another challenge
And
in this
land,
country.
like,
Property including land. Yeah. Well, especially land, I would say. Yeah, but now there are all these financial properties. Yeah, which also needs to be the taxed. Yeah. So yes, I mean, I think rather than just looking at adding, 2% points, 5% points on the income tax, you should look at the corporation tax, tax evasion, property tax.
Council tax and...
Council tax is a form of property tax.
Form of wealth tax in a way.
Yeah, but as far as I know, the last time properties were valued was like what? I mean,
1992 or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So you get like a place in Kensington that pays the same as a place in like Wakefield or whatever. So you have £100 million house with a £300 council tax bill a month.
Exactly. Yeah.
Are you optimistic about, say, like short term, this current Labour government? Are you optimistic about them and the changes that they can make, and then long term, as for the UK, for the West, for the globe?
Well, I'm quite pessimistic in the short term because this government has come into power. Okay, maybe not, with the kind of enthusiasm that greeted, the Tony Blair or some of the other governments, but came into power with huge majority. Yeah? And why are they kind of sabotaging their own possibility for the bolder, more long-term oriented action by immediately declaring that, we have a huge hole in our budget. Yeah,
we can't spend, we can't spend, we won't borrow. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, they may think they are managing expectation, but if they do not fundamentally change things, 5 years later, they'll be voted out.
Yeah, because everyone voted for them for change.
Exactly.
Not to say, we can't do anything.
You need to see some change, right?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously you can't kind of rebuild the economy that has been subject to underinvestment for 3 decades overnight, but at least start somewhere. Yeah?
Do something.
Yeah, and then more importantly, if you want to change the world, change the system, you need to change the narrative. Yeah, I mean, stop using we maxed out on the national credit card rhetoric. Yeah, start telling people, look, the NHS is in bigger trouble than it needs to be because we have underspent on social services. I mean, we need to do these new things which provide public spaces and collective services to raise our quality of life without necessarily increasing growth. But then we are also trying to find a way to use the impressive creativity that our nation has to generate more growth. I mean, do something to change this narrative, like kick out the immigrants, keep the rich people rich, and then you just hunker down and do whatever you are told to. At least they need to change that. Yeah, I mean, at some point even that is going to be in danger. But at least until now, I mean, this country has quite the impressive kind of reserve of creativity. So if they can be channeled in the right way, with different policies, different political narratives, I think there's a big potential in the future.
Yeah, I mean, talking from my own perspective, modern media and the opportunity for scale there for someone like, say, me, because we speak an English language which can be consumed all over the world.
Absolutely, yeah.
And people you just grab a camera now and you can talk to the whole planet. And I think there's a lot of opportunity within those kind of industries as well, social media and things. But, you know, give people good internet speed so that they can upload the videos, or, you know, give them the investment in the ideas for the researchers at Cambridge and stuff.
In many, many things, you know, I mean, look at the American movies, American dramas, half the actors are Brits.
Yeah. They love us as a bad guy, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, increasingly even some good guys.
Yeah.
So, you know, acting, art, you know, the drama.
And these are the important industries going forwards, because with AI, it's like they're the human things, right?
Exactly,
the experiences, sport, you know, people like sport, people like film. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. No one will want to watch the kind of the robot actors and, you know, robot footballers.
I mean, you get that with Keanu Reeves, right?
Yeah. Even if they are so good, you know, why do you care? You know.
But when you say you're like looking at optimism for the future, do you think that like a lot of blue collar jobs will be taken by like machines, and then a lot of jobs like accounting firms, for example, might be taken over by AI? So where does that leave us as a nation with like the future of jobs?
No, actually, in that kind of world, Britain has an edge, because you have this the pool of creative people, which maybe I don't know, 5 centuries later they'll be overtaken by machines, but not in the foreseeable future they'll be replaceable. Whereas if you're accountant, if you're low level lawyer, you know, if you're the kind of guy reading MRI scans in hospitals, the machines are coming for you.
What about the economists?
Yeah, economists too.
Yeah, they're coming for the economists.
Maybe they can advise the government to do some things that will make.
Maybe they can replace the politicians.
Yeah.
There you go.
That might be an idea. If they're going to repeat the same things that other people have said, what's the point of having humans?
Oh God, they just neoliberalism. Let's go.
Have your AI like there's too many immigrants.
Exactly.
Yeah, AI politicians. Would people vote for that?
I might.
Maybe. Yeah,
if they're going to do some changes, then
Probably
at least they'll be more reliable. Not in the sense of being good, but they'll be more predictable.
Yeah. More personality as well. Did you like that one, T?
Yeah, I wish he was my economics teacher at school. I wouldn't have dropped out.
Yeah. I wish he was mine at uni, to be fair. I don't know if it would help me go to any lectures though. But if you like that conversation and you want to get more into the UK topic specifically, we did a conversation with Andrew Craig that I think explores some of the issues in the UK really well, and we'll link that here for you.